Bounding into Comics and Brett R. Smith present An Escape from the Future.
Welcome to Escape from the Future, brought to you by Bounding into Comics. I'm your host and comic veteran, Brett R. Smith, and joining me today is comic veteran legend Mike Barron. Mike is a multiple Eisner Award-winning comic book writer and novelist. He's also the creator of Badger and the co-creator of Nexus. He's also well known for his 5-year run on The Punisher for Marvel Comics, which I read a lot of, and his relaunch of The Flash for DC. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Before we dive into all things Nexus, I wanted to get your take on modern writing within entertainment and what you think is the most glaring thing that you see from modern writing, which is missing or lacking.
Number one, failure to entertain. That's why people go to the movies, read books, and read comics. They want to be entertained. They want to become absorbed in a story that's so vital to them and entertaining that they lose track of what they're doing and they can forget what's going on in the real world. Now, we've seen recently that there's a new breed of writer on the field. Maybe not a new breed. It's probably a very old breed. But what differentiates them from good writers is they have no idea how to entertain. In fact, when you look at some of this material, you sense that entertainment isn't even on the agenda. I'm talking about the big two, of course, and also many movies and TV shows. Yeah. When you tune in and they seem to be pushing a message like a bumper sticker. And certainly social messaging is fine, and it's been the food of popular culture since time began. It goes back to Shakespeare, wrote Othello. But there's a way to do it and entertain. I always point to Kill a Mockingbird and The Grapes of Wrath, which are two highly entertaining and involving novels that became entertaining and involving movies, and they show how you do it. People don't resist a social message if it's entertaining. We have a whole group of writers out there that don't have the slightest clue how to engage the reader. Instead, they're just pushing their bumper stickers and messages on people. And why they keep on is a mystery to me because, as you know, many of these movies are crashing and burning. We're talking about, recent Marvels and DCs. People don't want to see that stuff. And the endless remakes, it's like there's no new originality in Hollywood anymore. And that goes for comics, too. Comics have their genres that people love. They love superheroes, horror, science fiction, good girl art, that sort of thing. And if you choose one of those genres, then you're free to make of it what you will, because there's bad and there's good in every genre. But at least you are aiming at a traditional audience and you have a sense of what that audience wants. And my impression is that many of these new writers, especially writing comic books for the big two or for movies or television, don't have any sense of what the audience wants. Every good writer writes to entertain himself first, but you have to make sure you're connecting with your audience. You have to say, I like it. Will others like it too?
Right. Yeah. Do you think I see a lot of problems among young writers, like you're talking about within comics, but also entertainment, TV and movies. Do you think it's a lack of fundamentals on behalf of the new writers, or do you think it's some kind of corporate thing where it's like, no, we ran this through AI, and we've poll tested and we've audience tested this and we've got this formula and we want you to press these buttons? I mean, I believe there's a lot of talented writers out there that just get shut out because they just don't do the bidding of the studio, the marketing goons with the PhDs in DEI and everything. But, I also wonder if it's kind of like, you're talking about Shakespeare, and those are kind of like fundamentals. Beowulf, these stories that get told for, over the campfire forever, these great yarns. Is there appreciation for that stuff? Do people understand and appreciate the fundamentals? Or do you think it's just kind of corporate entertainment sticking its fingers into creatives and lifting their leg on everything?
Where there are a myriad of problems. And one thing is that a lot of young writers haven't lived enough to write realistically and entertainingly about life. There's a great English novelist named John Brain, who's mostly famous for Room at the Top, but he also wrote a book called Writing Your Novel. And in it, he says, no one should attempt a novel before they're 40 years old because they simply don't have enough life experience to describe the world convincingly. Another thing that's very important is that it's the writer's job to imagine the point of view of everybody in the story he's talking about, no matter how foreign or removed it is from his own experience. And I think of William Styron
Mm,
writing The Confessions of Nat Turner or Sophie's Choice. William Styron was not a woman forced into the death camps, and he was certainly not a rebellious slave during the Civil War. But he was able to imagine those points of view so convincingly that his books take off. He also wrote As I Lay Dying when he was only 27, so he puts the lie to Brain's duel. But there are a handful of writers who do that. We all hate them.
right. No, that's a great point. Life experience does count. That's for sure. It's interesting. Immediately I thought of my grandparents, who lived through the Great Depression, World War II, Korean War. And then I think about the boomers as well, who lived through a lot, by the time they were in their 20s or 30s or 40s for that matter. A lot of mileage, maybe more mileage on those generations. Maybe that's why you get better artists. You get
No,
better,
no question about it. And also, they lived life.
yeah.
You think of somebody like Leon Uris, who was a Marine, and his first novel was Battle Cry, which was made into a movie. Leon Uris had lived, he'd fought, he was an experienced warrior. There's another very popular novelist right now named Jack Carr,
Yeah.
who was a special ops veteran in Afghanistan, and he writes about special ops. And it's absolutely convincing because he knows exactly what he's talking about in terms of ordinance and rules and regulations. But more importantly, Jack is a gifted writer who
Mhm.
knows how to lay down a string of words that the reader is happy to pick up and consume, and that's part of the trick.
Yeah.
Uh, there are so many ways to engage an audience, and I always think of the first three that come to mind is you create a memorable character that people want to know more about. Sherlock Holmes, probably the most popular fictional character in history. Number two, you create a situation that's inherently interesting. Jurassic Park, a park built around clone dinosaurs. Or number three, you have a seductive narrative voice. Jack Carr has that. Raymond Chandler had it. Hemingway had it. It's a little more difficult to achieve in movies and comics, but you can do it.
Mhm.
I think of David Mamet,
Yeah.
who has a very distinctive voice and been very successful in his films. He writes comedies like
Mhm.
State and Maine. He writes dramas like Glengarry Glen Ross. Uh, and he writes dialogue that sings, that speaks,
Yeah.
and it's distinctive. He doesn't
Yeah.
write like anyone else, but when you hear his dialogue, it
You
rings
know
true.
it. Yeah, you know it. It's funny. There's been films that I've watched that I didn't know were David Mamet movies. I had a weird inkling, and then I find out, like The Verdict. I remember I watched The Verdict the first time. I had no idea, and until I think maybe until after the movie was over, and I started doing a little research on it, seeing who worked on this. It's obviously Sidney Lumet. He was one of the greatest directors of the 70s, 80s. Great visionary auteur. But yeah, screenplay by David Mamet. Christian Toto just did a great write up on Spartan, which is a underappreciated movie
I
David
have
put
that
out.
movie.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting. I love it. I've always liked it. I think it's a great showcase of Val Kilmer, and I learned recently that Val didn't like working on that, nor did he like working on with David. I think there was some friction there, and he's got audio commentary on the DVD, which is kind of interesting to listen to. With that in mind, I've got to go back and listen to it. But yeah, I was also thinking about Elmore Leonard. Another guy who's, like you said, has got that voice. It's a characteristic. It becomes their style in that way, and he's another one who's one of those greats who's fortunately, some of his stuff has been adapted well and some hasn't, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like we need guys like you to do master classes. I know David, Mamet's done some master classes, but it's almost like the new writers they need help from the old masters. You
That's
know what I
that's,
mean?
that's true. And a lot of them reach out to me, and I am happy to help. I love to give back, especially if I find a spark of talent.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's awesome. Hey, let's talk about your new project, Nexus Scourge. This is an active campaign on Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and Fund My Comic. It's got 12 days to go. You guys have, I think, a little over 52. Let me share this really quick. There we go. $52,120, which is a tidy sum. That's awesome. 974 backers. That's awesome, dude. This is a sci-fi thriller and looks incredible. Kelsey Shannon's doing the artwork. Nexus is a multiple Eisner Award-winning sci-fi creation, so it's a legacy character. However, for those that might not know, give us a quick rundown on who the character is and the universe that you and Steve Rude both created, which you're now working within again.
Well, I met the dude and we were eager to work together. The moment he showed me his portfolio, I gave up trying to draw. And he said, well, and I said, well, dude, what do you want to do? He said, well, I want to do comics, but I can't write. What do you want to do? And we were in the right place at the right time. Capital City Distribution, the second largest comic book distributor in the world at the time, decided to launch their own titles. And they told me that they wanted a superhero. And my first thought was, what would make it compelling? It would be compelling if every time he showed up, somebody died. And that's not a great revelation. That's why cop shows and crime thrillers and lawyers and medical shows have dominated our popular culture for a half century, because life and death is the stuff of drama. And that's what people want. But I wanted him to be sympathetic. I didn't want a cold killer. So I made him a reluctant executioner of mass murderers. Nexus takes place 500 years in the future. Nexus dreams about mass murderers in the most intense and painful way possible. And when he wakes, he understands that he has to seek them out and assassinate them, or the dreams will recur more and more intensely until they drive him insane. And that's just a thumbnail description. There's so much more to it than that. Where does he get the power? Who sent him the dreams? How he came to be that way? His own father was a mass murderer in a Soviet style system. And when he blew up the planet he was ruling in order to save it, he fled with his wife and child into a black hole, hoping that it would crush them and obliterate him. He was choosing suicide and also killing his wife and unborn child. But instead, the black hole spat them out in a different part of the universe near this planet called Ilum, which had a breathable atmosphere underground, and they set up house there. But young Horatio grew up without any parental guidance. His two friends, Alpha and Beta, were synthetic characters dreamed up by this creature that lived in the center of the planet called the Merc, who was grooming Horatio to be the conscience of his race. And that's where Nexus gets his power and his mission from, by this insane alien. And that's just a tiny little bit of his world, because we've added so many characters and so much world building over the years that it's evolved in this huge, complex, sprawling epic. But when I tell a story, I have three rules. My first rule, and the most important, is it's my job to entertain, and I never lose sight of that fact. And for the past 10 years, I've been pretty happy with my output. I don't think there's a wasted word or a wasted picture in anything I've done, that it all contributes to the story. Number two is show, don't tell, which is axiomatic, especially for a visual medium like comics, although a lot of people don't seem to understand that. Comics are a visual medium, and any information you can impart to the reader visually that advances the story, you should. And use your words for characterization. Sometimes you use your words to advance the story because people speak, and their talk turns into action. But you have to be frugal with your words. We've all opened a comic and we've seen a page covered with 500 words in 8 caption boxes, and the eyes glaze over.
Yes, they do.
Oh, this is too much like work. I don't want to read this. We want comics to entertain. And in order to entertain, the reader has to enter the story completely to the exclusion of all else. And that means he loses sight of the fact that he's experiencing an artifice. He's involved in a gripping story, and that's all that matters. And I know how to do that.
Yeah.
Number three is be original. Uh, and that's where you have to be careful with your superheroes and your horror or science fiction or whatever it is, because so much has been produced for so many years. It's difficult to find an original slant,
Hmm.
uh, but a good writer can. And one of the reasons I say be original is we're all unique human beings, and those of us who write necessarily turn to our own experiences and impressions when we write, and that's part of what makes a story unique.
Hmm.
Uh, and also the language. You use language that's fresh. Like everybody who asks me, well, what do I do? How do I become a writer? I say, you carry a pen and pad with you at all times and write down anything that strikes you as interesting or story material, including names, historical events, uh, anything that might pertain to the story. And that's how I start every story.
Hmm.
And at some point, I reach what I call a critical mass. And that means I have so many notes surrounding the story and what I want to do that I see the general outline take place. And then I write an outline. But the outline is not just for me alone. The outline is something for anybody who's interested. I want them to read that outline
Hmm.
and say, holy shit, where do I get the book? And that's the purpose of the outline. So those are just three ways
Hmm.
that you create compelling fiction.
Yeah, you're turning this into a master class. So it's awesome. What's the synopsis for this new story of Nexus Scourge?
Uh, some kind of entity appears at the edge of the galaxy, wiping out civilized worlds. And of course, the galaxy is vast, and light can only travel so fast. So it takes a long time for news of this event to reach the center of the galaxy, near which Ilum resides. And that means it might have taken 1,000,000 years. This entity predates the Big Bang. It's the ancient evil that has always been there. You know, Herman Melville put his finger on it in Moby Dick when he wrote, "It's not the whale I despise; it's the thing behind the whale, that dark force that seeks to crush and destroy humanity." And it's kind of touching on that sense in my own way.
Hmm.
And when Nexus finally learns what's happening, he realizes it's up to him to stop this thing before it wipes out all intelligent life. And that's it. There will be no more. There will be nothing. There will be nothing if it succeeds.
Hmm. I love this video, by the way. It sounds amazing, dude.
Yeah.
So I love this character and I love the artwork. And so it's something that I'm definitely going to back.
Thank you, Brad. Play
I
the
love
video
this.
so they can hear the sound.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I couldn't.
I turned it off while you were
I appreciate that.
Ancient evil, billions of years old, wages war on the universe. Entire star systems are vanishing without a trace, leaving devastation in their wake. Nexus, the intergalactic guardian of lost souls, must stop the unnameable terror and its expanding scourge of destruction. The totality of everything in existence will collapse upon itself if he fails. With the fate of the cosmos in the balance, Nexus must confront his most dangerous adversary yet. Can he save creation from total and certain destruction, or will darkness reign supreme? Find out in Nexus Scourge, the all-new epic sci-fi adventure from Eisner-winning co-creator Mike Barron, exploding with Kelsey Shannon's dynamic artwork. Available now at baroncomics.com.
Killer video. Absolutely killer. I love it.
Thank you. It's of course Chris Brawley did that.
Yeah.
And you know, I've worked with many artists on Nexus, but I think none have embraced and approached the essence of the character as well as Kelsey has, except for Steve Root, of course, in our early days.
Yeah, it's hard to compete with the dude, to be honest. It's a high bar, man. Kelsey's knocking it out of the park. the artwork is just beautiful along with the coloring. I think he's really got the style dialed in nicely. I see a lot of Rude Dude. I see some Toth. I see some Wildy, which I think pairs really nicely with Kelsey's own style, which is very graphic. And I think that kind of comic rendering, it's just timeless.
It is.
And I think it's the kind of classic look that I think people kind of associate with the comics that they love. It certainly does me when I look at this stuff. It's just it's a bit of a throwback to a time when comics were just so beautifully visual and graphic. I also love some of the flatter colors. I just,
he's coloring it himself.
Yeah, I know.
His vision is sleekly futuristic as well. And, in one sense it's classic, and in another it's sleekly futuristic.
Yeah. He's got a modern take on what he's doing here, and I like it. And I think you're right. I think not since the Dude have we seen this kind of Nexus. So, and I think a lot of it also is the fact that he's also coloring it. So he's going into it with the pencils, knowing in a lot of ways what he's going to do on the back end with the colors, which is a huge advantage. So just beautiful, man. You got to be very proud, I would imagine.
We're very excited about this. We're shooting for 1,000 backers. We only need 24 more. There's one thing I can say about this book and about every book I've produced in the last 10 years is you will not be disappointed. You're going to love this story. You're going to read it over and over again. And when people say, is there anything good to read in comics, you'll point to this.
There's a lot of good stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of bad stuff, but that's what I try and do with this show, is to focus on the good, because honestly, I haven't seen an indie market like this since the 90s, kind of bad girl craze. I had Brian Polito on, I've had Graham on, and we've talked about those days. And this is a really healthy, fun indie market right now. And there's so many pros like you that are jumping in and producing exciting stuff. So, this doom and gloom that we often get from people, it's just not true. There's fantastic stuff out there. You just kind of got to look outside of the big two, and you got to get on Kickstarter and Indiegogo and search around, and you'll find cool stuff.
We call it the nether zone.
Something I also wanted to ask you is, so often when we see older characters brought back, there's this routine exercise of updating them for a modern audience. Are you and Kelsey doing anything new or different with the character of Nexus?
Well, the story is fresh.
Sure.
But that's it. There's no great switcheroo, which I used to do in the old days. When it occurred to me that Horatio was tired of his role and he would give up the costume, and it was taken over by a couple of different people in the past. One was a guy named Stan and one was a guy named Plexus. But in the end, Nexus always accepted his heritage and his fate and returned to it.
Right. I want to share this other page that you posted the other day. Man, this is so badass. I love this page. It's got such energy. That's great action,
That's another graphic novel that Kelsey is illustrating. In fact, he finished the first installment, which is what that's from.
Okay.
And Richard Meyer released it. He commissioned this series. But when he had put out the first book, I had started crowdfunding by then. And he said, Mike, you're in a better position to do this than I am. So I'm turning the rest of the book over to you. And this first issue contains 22 pages. It's a 66-page graphic novel. And Richard suggested that I look at it as a Western, which I had never done before. And I took that to heart. And it's particularly true in this first issue. It's called Triplets, and it's about 3 kids who are born who have perfect telepathic mind meld. In the future, and actually right now, there's only one method of instantaneous communication over interstellar distances, and that's telepathy. And when criminal organizations understand that these 3 kids can speak to each other in their heads instantly from anywhere, they kidnap them and spread them out through the galaxy to be able to transmit stock figures, portfolio figures to the center of the galaxy as they unfold instantaneously, thereby getting a huge jump on the rest of the field and making billions and billions of dollars in profit. The children's parents are devastated. They go to Ilum and say, Nexus, please, we're begging you, we'll get our children back. And he agrees. And that's the basis of the story. And it takes place on 3 different worlds where each of the children is held.
Is that something that our viewers can pick up now? Is that our...
If you want this, contact me. I have a limited quantity of these left. But the next 44 pages Kelsey is working on now, and they won't be finished for a while. We will probably be offering triplets either this winter or next spring. Cool. However, Kelsey is also hard at work coloring our next project, which is the Origin Remastered. The first 3 black and white oversized magazine size issues of Nexus that we did for Capital, which he's coloring, and the results are incandescent. Once you see his colors on those pages, it's a whole new story.
That's awesome. On Nexus Scourge, how many pages is it?
48, but there are a lot of extras.
Okay. And is this a square bound book?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And how far along is production? Do you guys have a rough idea when the book will print and ship?
Any day now. It's at the printer right now. For all I know, it may already have been printed, but probably not due to Memorial Day. But yeah, it's going to be printed. It might be done within the next week.
That's awesome. Now, that's good to know. That's good to know that it's done. It's in the printer. It's on its way. And you still have time left to back it. 12 days left. Everyone can find the campaign and order their copy from Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Fund My Comic, which I encourage everyone to do. Has having the book on 3 crowdfunding platforms helped from the standpoint of kind of spreading it out to maybe more places with foot traffic?
I think so. As you know, some people have an attitude about Indiegogo. Some have an attitude about Kickstarter. Fund Me Comic was founded by Luke Stone. Because so many people, especially in comics, were unhappy with the treatment they were getting from traditional crowdfunding platforms. And we will always be on Fund My Comic because Luke's a good guy. And, and they take less of the profits than Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but we like those too. We use all 3.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's like you said, some people have a preference where they get their books, but I know that there's a lot more foot traffic on Kickstarter than there is on Indiegogo, just because it's been around longer, and it just is what it is. So it's just kind of like, do you take a chance and put your, spread out your risk, or put all your eggs in one basket? I kind of like the idea of spreading out your risk and getting some purchases over at Kickstarter where there's a little bit more foot traffic.
And there are other places too. I've heard of a place called Backer Kit.
Yeah, right. All right. So last question. What are you watching? Any TV shows or movies, new or old, that you can recommend?
Well, I just watched The Last Kingdom on Netflix, and I can't recommend it too highly. It's a brilliant historical saga about the fight to unite England in the 9th century. It's based on Bernard Cornwell's novels. And I've noticed that TV series that are based on really good books and devote a season to adapting each novel are superior to those that are written strictly for the medium, with some exceptions. But another one I would point to is Bosch, a detective story based on the novels of Michael Connelly. And when I was done with that, I watched The Lincoln Lawyer, also based on the novels of Michael Connelly. That's on Netflix. And they were both very high quality, great, gripping stuff. You can't wait to see the next episode. Now, there are exceptions to the medium where people write for TV exclusively and they nail it. They're rare, but they occur. And I think of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are 2 of the finest examples made for TV that just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. We were talking about Jack Hart earlier. Obviously, he's got Terminal List, which is based on his books. And now we're going to get a prequel, which is Dark Wolf, which they've been filming. That's a killer series. I couldn't get enough.
I haven't seen it. I read the novel, but I haven't seen it yet because it's on Amazon Prime or something. And I keep hoping they'll release it as a DVD. That's how I get to see these shows.
I know. But, I'm the same way. I like having the physical media. A lot of the times with the streaming, depending on your internet connection and what time of day it is, the picture, the sound, it can really vary. And you don't get that problem with a Blu-ray or a 4K or something, you know, or a DVD for that matter. Lee Child's too, you know, you talk about another book series that's well adapted with Reacher. That's another one that's an Amazon #1, you know, streaming series right now.
I read a couple Reachers, and then I saw the first series on TV, and it was really great. But then Alan Ritchson opened up his big fat mouth and told me to go fuck myself, so I won't be watching the next series.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of like when I read that stuff, I was just sort of like, okay, he's a dumb actor. I didn't watch the show for who he is in real life, but
I know.
I like Lee Child's work, and I think that I think one of the reasons why that show is so good is that they have him as an executive producer and they have his hand in it, similar to the way they had Elmore Leonard working with the writers on Justified, just to kind of put his stamp of approval on it and make sure that that tone that he has in his books is reflected in the new writing and the new adventures of Tim Oliphant's character Raylan. You know what I mean?
There are a couple of things about Elmore Leonard that stand out. One, he's one of the very few really successful novelists who never outlined. He just sit down and start writing. And two,
Cold.
the adaptation of his novel Valdez is Coming, starring Burt Lancaster, is a masterpiece. It's overlooked, but everybody should see it. It's one of the greatest Westerns ever made.
What's it called again?
Valdez is Coming.
I will check that out. That sounds really cool. Yeah, I've been going back to older Westerns recently. Shane, Hour of the Gun with James Garner. God, there's some great stuff. Great stuff. Great. Those older Westerns are just such great stories.
They are.
And they have great messages. Yeah, there's just something really special about that time. So, all right. Well, sadly, we're out of time. Mike, what's the best way our viewers can support you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Bloody Red Baron.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook as Michael A. Baron and the Comics and Novels of Mike Baron. I'm on Substack as Mike Baron. I have a website, bloodyredbaron.com. And of course, the best way to support me is to buy my books. And I promise you, if you get Nexus Scourge, you're going to love it.
Yeah. It looks like the total package, man. You've got a great story and you've got great art. You know, it's a visual art first, like we were talking about, and Kelsey's nailing it. And I know that Kelsey's artwork is the hook 'em, and your story is going to clean them and fry them. It's going to be great. All right. For more videos like this one, subscribe to Bounding Into Comics channel on YouTube. Also, make sure and like this video and leave us a comment if you've backed Nexus Scourge or you plan to. Thanks for hanging out with us, and see you next time.